Hi, I'm Ann DeLisi.
And I'm Chef James Zergato.
And in this episode of Essential Cooking, we talk with culinary historian, New York Times bestselling cookbook author, and Emmy-nominated television host Katie Parla about her new book, Food of the Italian Islands. We talked to her, of course, about food, living in Italy, and her favorite places to eat. Hi, Katie.
Ciao, how are you?
How are you? It's good to hear from you. Thank you for talking with us.
Oh, I'm thrilled.
Yeah, hi, Katie. Thank you so much. I'm a big fan. I love the grab bag that you just offer the world with just like,
oh, thanks.
You know, the podcast and the content, the free content, the curated stuff. I'm actually doing a walking tour with your colleague next month.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
you're going to have the best time.
I'm stoked. I just booked it. And I believe you have I think I can say friend. You know Anthony Lombardo here in Detroit. He's a good friend
he's
of
the
ours.
best.
I think I can say friend of yours. I don't know if that's overreaching. If maybe you hate his guts, but we love him.
I don't hate his guts at all. He's a total G, and I'm obsessed with his food. And I'll be coming to Detroit with the book. So
that's great.
And Anthony's always so nice to host and support. So big fan over here.
Because I think you did a dinner with another book, right?
Yeah, with Food of the Italian South in 2019. And it was such an epic night. It was so special. I got a little tour of Detroit. It was incredible. And I'm kind of like pissed at myself that it's been 4 years since I've been. So I'm excited to get back.
Well, hey, we're happy to have you back in the city, and definitely let us know. Ann and I will take you around as well. We'll go to the dinner for sure.
Katie, do you know when you're coming back to Detroit?
We're going to nail down dates pretty soon, but we were talking late August.
Late August. Okay, that's good to know. So we can make sure we're around for when you're here. Thanks for talking with us. You've been going to Italy for 25 years, or actually living in Italy for 25 years. What's the biggest thing that you've learned, not just about food, but about the culture that you didn't know when you went into it?
I mean, I didn't know anything when I got there. I grew up in an Italian-American family in New Jersey saying like, I'm Italian, but not knowing the language, the culture, the kind of like subtle, unspoken subtext, like totally clueless. So I've learned everything. I think the number one takeaway is that you should never leave the house with wet hair. That is a universal. If you want to alienate yourself from 60 million people fast, you don't dry your hair before you go outside. Everyone will intervene. They're very concerned about your health and honestly, like profoundly offended on a personal level. And so that's a little tip for travelers.
Oh, that's brilliant.
You know, when you just said they're concerned about your health, it brings me to this one point in the book when you were talking about how Italians, decide what they're going to eat when it comes to digestion.
Oh, yeah,
and I thought
you got to digest.
Really fascinating. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, if you've encountered Italian cuisine in Italy, you have no doubt been confronted with a menu that features a number of courses. Those courses are served in an order that kind of comes through digestive trial and error. So you start with like a small, it could be a fatty dish, some cheese, cured meats, but a small portion of it. Then you move on to your starch. That could be pasta or rice or polenta, depending on where you are. Then you get a little protein, a lot of vegetables, and desserts, often fruit. I know everyone thinks we sit around like chugging tiramisu all day long, but actually fruit, either like very aggressively cooked until it's very soft or served fresh, is important because you got to insert fiber into the litany of aforementioned dishes in order to properly digest things. And when people are judging a pizza, a trattoria, really any food experience, they might acknowledge at the end of the meal that it was good, but they'll let you know the next morning if they've processed it efficiently or if they had to wake up and drink a lot of water. There's certainly an acknowledgement that food is not just for pleasure, but also nourishment, and your body needs to sort of respond appropriately.
We might want to adopt that in the United States a little bit.
That would be great.
I wonder because, I'm obviously, I share that kind of like dilemma of like, people say they're Italian. I have family that I grew up with that are like, oh, I'm Italian. It's like, well, it's Italian American versus Italian are very different things, and both can be wonderful. But when you come back and you eat in Italian American restaurants, like, do you have that nostalgia and that love of kind of the big, silly, like, chicken parm and meatballs, or does living in Italy spoil you to where you come back and Italian American feels clunky? Like, how do you walk that line?
Look, they're very distinct cuisines, and while there might be a little sort of nugget of origin in a lot of Italian American dishes from Italy, they're really different, especially portion size. So I love an Italian American red sauce joint. I love a chicken parm the size of my head. I just serve it with a side of Tums.
Yeah, fair.
All right, Katie, let's talk about your latest book, Food of the Italian Islands, and what got you to, get to this point of saying, this is what I'm going to cover next. The islands are next on my list. You've probably been amassing information and writing notes for a couple of decades here. But talk about this book and what got you to want to write this particular book.
Well, my previous title was Food of the Italian South, which tackled the Lower Peninsula, and I deliberately excluded Sicily because I wanted to give it its own platform. I didn't want to rob any attention from Molise or Basilicata because Sicily does loom so large and the cuisine is just so magnificent. And so when it came time to write the next book, I only want to write things that I'm super passionate about. I have passion for Sicily, my ancestral homeland. I'm fully obsessed with Sardinia. And so when I kind of launched the project, I thought Sicily and Sardinia are going to be a great couple. But then what about Ponza and Procida and Giglio and all of these other places? I saw that they had a lot of sort of themes in common, diets that aren't fish-based historically, but instead really rely on pork and lamb and lots of vegetables and tons of legumes, things that you could raise inland where it was safer. And so I saw that there was maybe a story to tell about island cuisines in general, while also breaking down some unique factors. And, you've leafed through the book, so there's a section dedicated to Sicilian street food and Venetian aperitivo culture. So there certainly are distinct rituals that take place in each area, but the islands really do have a lot of commonalities.
You put Sardinia first. How come?
It's the best and greatest place. This whole entire book project is a thinly veiled effort to make everyone want to go there.
I'm very fascinated with the book as well. It's beautiful and it's very thoughtful too with the QR codes and kind of the cookbooks nowadays. You're very conscious that like not everyone reads a book front to back, and some people cherry pick and need content now, and it needs to lead to other content. So it's actually a very well put together book, and I'm sure you've learned now. 85 different contributions, through books, editing, and writing, and I think it's no surprise that you have that you have a book that's so vast but yet so specific.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I am aware of my limits. I am a writer. I can tell you how to pinch Culurgione's clothes, but it's going to be a lot better for you if I just show you with a video, which is accessed through a QR code.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I haven't seen. I'm sure other people have done that, but I haven't seen that yet in the book. It's great.
Thank you.
Also, Katie, talk about what got you to take a different approach, a more thematic approach. These blue bubbles are so great because they're like a guide. Like, you want to eat this, then try this or put this. What got you to decide that would be a way to approach this book?
Well, thank you so much for noticing that design feature. Throughout the book, there are these blue bubbles, which are obviously supposed to kind of evoke the sea. And they, they might appear on a page of swordfish meatballs. And then it says, hey, like pair this with the caper salad from the other chapter. And, in Italy, I mentioned this earlier, we eat in courses. We sit down and we have one and then the plate goes away and another one comes. That's not the way people eat in the States. And so I wanted people, rather than seeing the necessity to fully recreate a 5-course meal, to feel more free to mix and match with a little bit of guidance. And so, where there's like an unctuous dish, I'm like, hey, throw in some like acidic salad alongside that. So that was the reasoning behind the beautiful, very charming blue bubbles.
I think too, what I noticed when I go to Italy, that I love bitter flavors, and here in the Midwest, that's can be a challenge, even just down to like radicchio. The Midwest does not embrace bitter the way that Italy does. And I think obviously Italy does it for so much, for digestion. But, I think Amaro culture has taken off, spritz culture has taken off. But, the bitter greens, the bitter lettuces, that when I go to Italy, that's always the first thing that I really fall in love with again, is like, oh my God, like just a celebration of like dandelion and just, those kind of, notes. So it's always nice to see a book celebrate any kind of, spritz or Amaro or bitter green.
Oh yeah, and I'm doing it all because there's a whole cocktail chapter where it's like build your own digestivo with bitter flavors. Of course, there's a little sweetness to it too.
I was gonna say, do you have a go-to? Like, do you have like if you're like if you're going in blind and you can't see the bar, like, do you have a spritz or an amaro that you lean towards or that you always order?
For spritz, I'm always going for the Select Spritz, which is Venice's red bitter liqueur. Now that Aperol was acquired by Campari and was really blown up globally, that's kind of the dominant, much more sweet red liqueur that finds its way into most spritzes in the world. But I love a little Venetian spritz made with Select, which is kind of red and bright like Campari, but its bitterness and sweetness fall somewhere between Campari and Aperol. And honestly, when I'm looking for an Amaro, more often than not, there's a homemade one in the back that doesn't have a pretty label. So I always ask, do you have like a Genziana? Do you have an Amaro fatto in casa? And, you can, of course, find the big guys everywhere, but I find just, interrogating the server about what's not displayed always leads to some really fun bitter things. And, bitter's better.
It's funny you say that because, I have a good friend that spent a lot of time in Abruzzo, and Genziana is one of my favorite things to drink. And I was there for a wedding, and I came back, and one of my friend's uncle made Genziana. He hunts it and makes it and dries it and does all the things, and the gentian root, obviously. And I brought back a bottle. It was probably 8 ounces, and I had it. I was taking little sips, kind of savoring it. And Anthony Lombardo came over, and I showed him. I was like, "Hey, look what Uncle Tony gave me." And Anthony chugged the rest of it. It was like 6 ounces of Genziana. He literally opened it and he drank the whole 6 ounces. And not only that, but I was like, "That's more than you need." But that was, Genziana is one of my favorites for sure. That's you can't find it here as well.
You only need a little sip to digest, Anthony.
I know. Tell Anthony. Yeah, Anthony, if you're listening, take it easy.
We'll be right back right after this.
Black perspectives haven't always been centered in the telling of America's story. Now, we're taking center stage. Introducing NPR's Black Stories, Black Truths, a collection of Black-led stories from NPR's podcasts. Search NPR Black Stories, Black Truths wherever you get your podcasts.
Katie, one of the things that I found fascinating was the history that you offered and presented in terms of how certain foods got to, like Sicily, for instance. That really opened my eyes to realizing that it took a long time for tomatoes to get there and eggplant to get there. Did you know a lot about this history when you went there, or was that part of your whole journey to learn about where the food actually came from and how it got to these islands?
So for the book, I did a little extra investigation, but I've been visiting Sicily for a long time and always was interested in reading up either in an archival setting or in cultural history books about how ingredients arrive and how they become part of the food culture. And you're right about tomatoes. They arrive from the Americas into Spanish dominion, which included the Iberian Peninsula and Sicily and southern Italy. And at first, they're mostly just treated as ornamental. I mean, they are very beautiful, obviously, but they weren't food for most people until just a couple of hundred years ago. Whereas more caloric, easily cellarable produce like potatoes were embraced and ended up in sweets and in savory dishes too. So it's really interesting to kind of get into the mindset of, 9th century Sicilians who are encountering sweet citrus and sour citrus and eggplants for the first time, and imagine how they would have been sort of encountering them, and then actually see the documents that refer to these things, either the agriculture behind them or their use in recipes. It's endlessly fascinating, and because there's so many pieces of scholarship out there, you can really sort of cobble together a history of these ingredients with some legwork.
One of the other things that I found fascinating was the knife presentation, the Sardinian knives. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm a knife lady. I am obsessed with blades. I have a kind of terrifying collection in my apartment of sheep shears and machetes and all sorts of agricultural instruments. And we've established I'm obsessed with Sardinia. So when I started visiting the island, I would always, go to the local knife shop, and every village has, if not a knife shop, then a dude who makes knives. And you have to pay him cash, and it's, not very legal, but it's fine. And so in Sardinia, because of the agricultural nature of the island, you have knives that were created for specific uses, whether it's grafting plants or skinning boars. And they're really beautiful pieces. The handles are, polished and carved. The blades can be different shapes. And I'm so intrigued by that. And it's also a way to meet locals. I mean, you can definitely order offline. I think there's a site called like sardinianknives.it, but it's really fun to be able to, be invited into someone's house, see their knife stash, and then find the local bancomat so you can pay them for their work.
That's pretty cool.
You mentioned potatoes too. I feel like it's kind of funny because there's a lot of pizza and bread potato culture there, more than, I don't say more, but equal, if not more, to tomato. Like people associate pizza in America with, it's without tomato, people would argue that it's not pizza here. But I feel like in Rome and in other, in other parts of Italy, you see so much potato in bread and in pizza.
Absolutely. It brings a caloric heft to something like a focaccia dough or a pasta dough or even a cookie dough. Food of the Italian South has a potato cookie in it, and it might sound odd, but it's a starchy, flavorful ingredient that brings, literally just calories. A lot of the recipes in the books were developed by peasants who were really interested not just in feeding themselves and getting calories, but also flavor. Impoverished people want to eat delicious food. It gives them dignity. And so the potato served as this really crucial ingredient across cultures throughout the South and the islands.
Katie, when you publish a book, do you have an Italian version of it that's translated into Italian? Do Italians want to read a book that feels like it's for us to get educated about that country? But what is that relationship like when you release a book?
So only one of my titles has been translated into Italian. And, I'm definitely writing with not just an American audience in mind. I want anyone with interest in Italian regional cuisines to be able to walk away having learned something. So if there are any Italian publishers out there, I am available for a negotiation on foreign rights. Happy to sell them with the right terms.
So we'll have to translate this episode in Italian.
Va bene.
Katie, I have a question because I've read some of your restaurant referrals and and the kind of definitely eat here and the definitely don't eat here touch points. Have you ever had pushback or an interesting interaction with a business owner or business chef or whatever that you said, hey, stay out of this restaurant, it kind of sucks? Like, do you cross paths with these businesses? Like, I have to imagine you're known on these walking tours, and if you tell somebody, you telling your public, stay out of this pizzeria, it sucks. Does anybody
It's
ever?
happened.
I was just saying, is there any that come to mind that were you ever regretful or like, okay, we're going to take a different street next time we do this walking tour?
It's not like I'm watching my back out there, but there definitely have been encounters. Once I visited a very famous restaurant near the Vatican called L'Arcangelo, Archangel, and the meal was apocalyptic. And so I thought I did what I thought was a very funny, tongue-in-cheek, Book of Revelation referenced review, which a negative review is called a stroncatura. And after I published it, we're talking a year after I published it, some Italian blog picked it up and all hell broke loose. I got invited back to the restaurant for this big apocalypse dinner. And it was so weird. In the end, I was right. The food was bad that day. But yeah, the response can sometimes be a little over dramatic. Which
I think that's on brand for, just Italian, business operators and restaurateurs. I feel like, there was that Puglia chef who was with the his mouth
Bros?
mold. Yeah, I feel like you see that's just
that was bad.
Yeah, that was there just seems to be a lot of romance. It's a people passion and in both ways.
Well, I think no one wants to hear that their food is terrible or that the experience is terrible or that someone's not understanding what they're putting on the table. But there's another layer there. It's very bad form to make someone lose face in public. So while in maybe a political setting, politicians might go after each other, but in other sectors, it's kind of rude and a cultural faux pas to do what I did, which was to write an honest review. It's one of the reasons there isn't a lot of what you might consider unbiased food journalism in Italy. It's, it falls into the realm of sort of a lack of tact.
And do you lean against that? Are you continuing to kind of write reviews like that and kind of push back, or have you kind of said, okay, this is a cultural norm that I'm adjusting to, and I'm gonna be more, I'm gonna back off a little bit?
I have a huge responsibility to my readers who often crowdsource different recommendations. And sometimes people come to my site and they see my recommendations, and I want them to see the places that I discourage that are not worth their time, that are run by people who maybe aren't properly paying their staff or who just are generally problematic and wouldn't otherwise have the indication that they should, avoid the place like the plague. I do not want to compromise my values in that sense. And so even though maybe a better businesswoman would just go with the flow and assimilate, I don't do that. So.
Got it. Is there a restaurant, now let's say you're off the clock, you're not thinking about, which I'm sure is very rare, but let's just say, do you have one restaurant in Rome that you have been to the most as a regular, just like you hanging out, maybe it's near your apartment, that's not necessarily a business affiliation or like a recommendation you're trying to write? Like, just what is your most frequent place that you are a regular in Rome?
So whether I'm going by myself, with my boyfriend, with my parents, a friend, a chef, whatever, I'm going to Cesare al Casaletto. It's not super central, but it's easy to get there on a tram. And it's kind of a neo-trattoria. That is, it's serving soulful, thoughtful Roman classics, but there's also linen on the table and an insane wine list. And it's super special. And I recommend it all the time. I write a lot of restaurant reviews and lists, and it's in there. So there's no chance that there's a sort of special secret Parla approved spot that's not going to be available to the readers.
Yeah, I'm just curious about where you go the most. Like, where are you not sick of trying the food? I'm sure on some of these walking tours you have. I mean, I've done a few of these around the world, and I feel like when you go, sometimes you see the host that's like, I'm not partaking in the food today. Like, I have 3 more of these tours, and I can't handle it. Is there a place where you're like, I never get sick of the food?
I never get sick of the food. At Mordier Vai, the artichoke sandwich and the brisket sandwich are amazing. I never get sick of the potato and mozzarella pizza. At Pizzarium, I never get sick of the roasted chicken at Panificio Bonci. I never get sick of the pizza rosa at Roscioli. The list goes on. The places that take people on tours are the places that I would be at anyway, and places where, I think if you're a visitor to Rome, you shouldn't eat every meal seated at a restaurant or a trattoria. You got to graze. You got to eat the way that locals eat, often on a budget, often on the fly, and those places are all perfect to me.
Yeah, I think that's why you have such a success with it. I mean, just like I said, I just love the diversity you're offering content. And where are people finding you mostly? Is it Instagram? Is it Twitter? Where are you finding that most people are connecting through you?
So definitely Instagram. I'm at Katie Parla, and I have the same handle on Facebook. And also just through SEO. I built a new site last year, and we worked on SEO, something I had never thought about for a solid 2 decades of having a website. That was a mistake. But I wanted people to be able to find all these free resources on my site and to really be able to think, okay, I'm going to the Amalfi Coast or Puglia, I'm going to Sicily, and have those city guides pop up, on the first page of Google rankings. And that way people can have what I think is a very honest recounting of what they can expect at the table in those places.
Thank you so much, Katie. Congratulations on the book, Food of the Italian Islands. We hope to see you next time you're in Detroit.
Can't wait.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Ciao.
You too.
You as well. Ciao.
We would like to thank you for listening.
Essential Cooking is produced by me, Ann Delisi, along with my co-host, Chef James Regato. This episode was also produced, engineered, edited, and mastered by Connor Anderson, with production support from David Lyons. Original music by the Mallet Brothers. Essential Cooking is a production of WDET's public radio station.